Hello, welcome to Yogis on the Road. I'm Alexis, and I'm here with Giuseppe and Guy Donahaye. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Yes, we're just going to continue our discussion, satsang on yogic philosophy. We had talked a little bit about the paths to yoga in the last conversation, and so Ashtanga, Ashta meaning 8 and Anga meaning limb, is an 8-limbed path. And so there's 8 different limbs. And so we were going to describe the first 2 limbs of the system, which are the yamas and the niyamas. You know, they're based in the physical world, so they apply to all of us.
Yeah. Typically, most people are approaching yoga through asana practice. That's like the first introduction to yoga, and then I guess an interest in yoga philosophy develops from that. At least this is the way it is in the West. And it's really important to acknowledge that Ashtanga yoga is actually an 8-step path, not just a monolithic path going through this physical body. And the first 2 steps of Ashtanga yoga are just as important. I mean, we give asana practice, a lot of emphasis, and there we also tend to forget what the purpose of it all is. We're ambitious to learn to do a handstand or a deep back bend or whatever, but really the purpose of asana practice in the context of Ashtanga yoga is to be able to sit, to be able to sit comfortably, to master your breathing, to become healthy, to be able to then move towards pranayama, which is the next step, and then pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. These are the internal steps. But without really focusing on or mastering the first steps, none of that will work. Even asana practice will not get us very far, and in fact we will suffer greatly in asana practice without paying attention to the yama and niyama.
Is that why asana is number 3? Because just like you said, now we could suffer in asana if we don't have the first 2 limbs, down. Or why is it that we start with 3 and then go back to 1 and 2, but at the same time 1 and 2 are essential for 3 to develop?
Well, there's probably different ideas about that. Patabi Joyce used to say that without a strong mind and body, the yama and niyama are very difficult to master. So first get healthy and strong, and then you can really follow these principles. The more traditional classical way is, of course, to take care of those moral, ethical principles first. In fact, traditionally a teacher would not take a student on until they felt that they were fit, until they felt that they were clean, and they felt that they were properly focused on the path. So, if somebody just came along to a yoga master, a yogi, let's say, somebody who had attained something and said, hey, I want to learn some asanas, he'd probably just ignore him. But if he said, I would like to do some asanas so that I can meditate, then he'd probably say, go away, become a vegetarian, take care of whatever issues you might have in life, and when you're ready, then come to me and I'll teach you some deeper knowledge.
Interesting.
Yeah, I found it to be a cultural difference. Like in the East, the first 2 limbs of being a good person are prerequisites for doing asana. But here in the West, people think that yoga is actually just asana. So sometimes I'll talk to people and they'll say, I do yoga, but they don't even have an awareness of the other limbs besides asana. So it's almost not even included in this culture's definition of yoga. So
Yeah.
it's like been brought over, and I don't know.
Yeah, what's the difference between doing a stretch in the
Yeah.
gym before you do some weights or
Yeah.
sun salutation? There isn't really any unless you start incorporating certain principles.
Yes.
And I think also one of the beautiful things about asana practice is that you have no choice but to learn some of those principles. For instance,
Yeah.
the very first principle of yoga is Ahimsa, which means non-harming. Now, if you violently throw yourself into a stretch or into a posture, you're going to hurt yourself, and then perhaps you'll just give up your yoga practice there and then. But if you either if you come with an attitude of being careful in your practice, or if when you hurt yourself, you suddenly wake up and realize, oh my God, I have to not harm myself, then you are automatically learning something about the yama. But traditionally, as I said, yama are the first principles of yoga. And in a certain sense, in Hindu philosophy, we often get lists of things. So Ashtanga Yoga is a list of 8 practices. And the first practice, yama, is a list of 5 practices in the Yoga Sutra. In other texts, you can have 10 yamas and 10 niyamas. The yamas and niyamas are often sort of almost interchangeable as well. But the very first one always is ahimsa, non-harming. If you were totally at peace, totally healthy, in harmony with nature, then naturally you would experience samadhi. Naturally you would know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
You would feel wholesome and have knowledge about yourself. But unfortunately, we live in quite a toxic world, toxic environment, and we have many different practices that cause harm to us. Some of those are lifestyle issues which prevent us from feeling calm and quiet and relaxed. We may have excessive coffee drinking. We may eat meat or drink alcohol, or be in environments which are very stressful. These things cause harm to our bodies and our minds consequently. So the very first principle, non-harming, applies both to your environment and to yourself. So the primary consideration for a meditation practice is what's going on with my mind, what's going on with my body.
Mm-hmm.
How can I put myself in a good condition? It's quite a selfish agenda. It's quite an egotistical agenda, in a sense. But what you also discover is that if you cause disturbance to others, to the environment, echoes come back to harm you also. So you have a duty also to take care of everything that's around you, not just yourself. So even though your motive is really, I need peace, I need quiet, I want to meditate, you then realize that if I don't take care of the whole environment, everything around me, I won't be able to get that anyway. Of course, there are some people who come to yoga who are highly moral in the first place and are already taking care of the environment. They're already taking care of their family and people, etc. And they're probably much more suited to a deep yoga practice right off the bat. They don't have to learn the yamas and niyamas. It's that they're actually self-evident. This is just a way to live in a wholesome way.
We talked about attachment and aversion and how those are things we're trying to purify in the 3 paths. And it reminds me of that with Ahimsa, that people who are firmly established in nonviolence, they don't have the attachment of like hatred or resentment towards something. And they, if you're not aggressive with others, then you're not carrying that attachment, even if it's like an inverted negative attachment. So then that does actually like clear the mind for good asana practice to have ahimsa.
Right. Well, ahimsa being the number one on the list, all the other practices are sublims of ahimsa. So, for instance, the second yama is satya, telling the truth.
Because lies will hurt someone.
Or yourself.
Yeah.
Any of the other, if you don't have some kind of perfection or control over the other sublims, brahmacharya, asteya, not stealing, sexual incontinence, or grasping, attachment to things, these will all cause pain.
Yes.
So the main principle is non-violence or non-harming. So if you can do that in every possible way, then you will understand that how to live a life which is in harmony with your whole environment.
Yeah.
How do you go about that for, let's say, the person that has a past of working in finance? I'm going stereotypical for everyone who works in finance and doesn't
Coke
steal.
dealing.
But let's say that, then you do drugs and like money and,
It's just the world.
it's you against
Society.
me, So what is the approach? Like, do you study or do you tell yourself, okay, I must stop lying, for example, for whatever reason? Or
Well, there's probably two principal ways to change. One is education, and another is experience. So, through life and through repeating the same situations over and over as they do, if you don't have any proper kind of control or correct moral attitude, you keep repeating the same lessons over and over, and eventually perhaps you learn that you have to do things differently. And the other option obviously is to read books or to meet somebody who can educate you. But I think what you really mean is how do you actually gradually change from one thing to another?
yeah.
And as I said, Pattabhi Jois used to say that asana practice is the first step, it's the foundation. It's like a mini, as we mentioned before, it's like a mini
microscope.
laboratory in which you can test all your attitudes and behaviors and see what works and what doesn't work. And, often, for instance, you'll have fear when approaching a particular posture. Maybe you have fear that you're going to hurt yourself, or fear that you're going to fall down, or just some irrational fear suddenly just pops up in your mind as your body opens and emotionally you feel vulnerable or whatever. And we have some beautiful tools in yoga. One of those is breathing. What happens when you're afraid? Your breathing stops. You feel totally blocked. You contract. And if you are, being taught in a good way, the teacher will say, okay, now just try and breathe and relax and see if you can achieve this challenge. And what you find is that those challenges really reflect experiences you have outside. And alternatively, as well, that you can apply those same principles as work in yoga practice, in asana practice, in life. So, for instance, you find yourself in a challenging situation which provokes fear, and of course you stop breathing, you feel blocked, you feel closed down, you can't function, you can't operate. And if you remember your lessons from your yoga practice, you will start to breathe, and you'll start to relax, and you'll start to maybe make incremental little steps towards resolving some issue. as we do in asana practice. It's a slowly, step-by-step method, if it's taught well. And so there are many, many lessons that can be taught through asana practice that can be very meaningful in life and help you to transition, transform yourself. And one of the most important features is having a vegetarian diet. It's really, in my opinion, one of the most important factors in yoga practice. Of course, not everybody may feel healthy and strong enough without the meat products. Maybe they have a history, long history, family history, genetic predisposition, which is very hard to change. But if you want to get to achieve the higher and deeper aspects of yoga, a vegetarian diet is very important. Not just vegetarian, but also a sattvic diet. We mentioned that in the first talk a little bit. Eating food which is really wholesome and supportive for your body and your mind. And that's, it's a quite a hard process for a lot of people. But because people get attached to these amazing postures, they get attached to the idea of being able to do those amazing postures. And they recognize that when, they're trying to get deep into a twist,
They have a burger in their stomach.
they have a burger in their stomach, that it's not happening. They feel nauseous, they feel sick, they can taste the onions.
Yeah, it's visceral.
And they become motivated to eat differently. So asana practice is also a great educator in that sense. If you have the ambition is actually extremely valuable. The attachment is extremely valuable in the beginning because it motivates you to make changes in your lifestyle which are very positive and healthy. After a certain point, those ambitions may end up being quite negative and causing you pain themselves. So, and that's also something you learn in asana practice. You become attached to being able to do that posture. Once you've used the attachment to change your life and make yourself put yourself in a good condition so that you can do the posture, then a few weeks later you totally lose that posture for whatever reason. And then the attachment to the posture will cause pain. And through experiencing that pain, then a bit, some degree of detachment arises.
Yeah, it's humbling.
And so
Often.
the asana is also teaching you not just through attachment to get healthier, put yourself in a better condition, but also when that attachment is excessive, it teaches you how to then let go of it and move to a more peaceful way of being. Because attachment is one of the principal things that yogis need to release.
Yeah.
As we mentioned before, abhyasa vairagya. Abhyasa means practice, and vairagya means non-attachment. Non-attachment to the results of your actions. Do it for the love. Do it for the sake of it. Do it for...
I find it interesting that there is never one thing that is only good or bad. Like, attachment is positive, like you say, at the beginning, because it gets you motivated to explore this whole world of yoga, asana, or whatever, and then you have to let go of it. So there is never one thing that is like intrinsically good or bad. We say, oh, attachment is bad, no attachment. But no, actually it can be good at the beginning,
On the relative plane, yes, we can say that. But when you get towards the absolute, then we have to say that that's no longer the case.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, an attachment to the goal of yoga, an attachment to realization, enlightenment, at a certain point stands in the way. At a certain
Totally.
point, that
You have
has
to let go.
That has to be released. We have to be open to grace.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. I was thinking, for example, earlier we were talking about ahimsa and causing no harm first to you and maybe to the most immediate things in your everyday, like but that can expand to also global, more global situation. Like, for example, vegetarian diet can really change the way, for example, economics, politics, or people. You know what I'm getting at?
I do. I think it's in a way it's unfortunate that these laws are framed in the negative. Non-violence, ahimsa, asteya, not stealing.
Mm-hmm.
What's the positive of not harming? It's love, compassion, caring. And in a way, it's unfortunate that we don't really talk about that directly. Loving the world, loving the environment, taking care of everybody. That's the positive.
Interesting. Yeah, that's true. I mean, does it give maybe a different feeling when you say love instead of non-violence?
Probably, yes.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's like why I never like to say veggie burger, because it implies burger. I don't want that.
Yeah. That makes me think of how we're in the Kali Yuga. And then I also was thinking about even just the sutra on Ahimsa pratistayam tat sanmidao vaira tyagaha. Being firmly grounded in nonviolence creates an atmosphere in which others can let go of their hostility. So it's almost like, because yamas are in relation to the other, that by the yoga practice of ahimsa, then my expression of the absence of violence, it releases the violence.
It's contagious.
Yeah.
Contagious positivity.
Yeah, like in the world.
Yeah.
So it's effective in that way.
Well, if you meet a truly realized being, just being in the presence of somebody like that, and that's actually the
darkness dispeller.
Usually, the translation of the sutra says that one who is established in non-violence, if you're in the presence of one who's established in non-violence, all beings cease to feel hostility.
Yes.
Is that sort of like the role of like a teacher, for example? You embody. Ideally, you embody yoga, in the general term, so that people can be inspired and.
Like I say, it should be kind of contagious, which is also putting in the negative, I guess. Yeah, I think we talked about this the first time. You asked about how do you find a true teacher? Should they be teaching philosophy? Should they be teaching other limbs of yoga? And I think I said that if yoga lives within an individual, that is somehow expressed, that sort of resonates and is transmitted, is shared with others. It would be an ideal, but we're human beings. And obviously many yoga teachers today are exclusively concerned about teaching physical postures. So what does that have to do with compassion, love, and caring? They may do, but
yeah, it's interesting. It makes me think about like the teacher-guru relationship and the kind of the problems that have happened, not only in like the guru yoga world lately, but just in problems with leaders in general, and about how people come to yoga from this place of like addiction and attachment, and maybe in some level they're like attracted to people that match that in teaching. And it's difficult because like a lot of the teachers aren't really embodying ahimsa, and it's not noticeable to students who don't know it.
Well, if we're talking about yoga in the West, and we're just talking about asanas, then it's a bit much to expect teachers to embody, real yoga, because there's not much education about that. Even if you do your 200 hours teacher training,
discouraging.
and something in theory, that's not the same as embodying it. And, they say each stage of yoga takes about 12 years to manifest. So I think even to teach asanas, really you should be practicing for at least 12 years before you're actually mature enough to say something meaningful about it. Not 200 hours. I don't know how many hours in 12 years. It's quite a few, several zillions of hours.
1 zillion. It's in the
1 zillion.
It's in the Puranas.
Yeah. So yes, I mean, I think sadly when we talk about yoga today, we're not really talking about yoga. I mean, in the West, it's asana practice. It should be really called asana exercise. It shouldn't really be called yoga in general. It can only really be called yoga if there's some education, like some deep education for the teacher, and some pure intention as well. What is the teacher trying to communicate, trying to convey to the students? And, I think a lot of times, because it takes this period of 12 years to mature, all we can really do is just to parrot our teachers. So it's not coming from a very meaningful place necessarily. And if
it's not established in the being.
If your teacher had been teaching for 7 years, and his teacher or her teacher had been teaching for 6 years, and his teacher had been teaching for 5 years, then of course there's never really a maturity in yoga. And we're just talking about asanas, 12 years of asana practice, not necessarily 12 years of pranayama or 12 years of following the yama and niyama. It's obviously a lifelong practice, lifelong endeavor. I mean, you could also look at it from the karmic point of view. I like to try and look at things in quite a concrete way, and reincarnation is a sort of assumed fact in yoga, but I don't necessarily see the evidence of that reality. But it is said that some people are born already with an
predisposed,
unconditioned mind with some detachment, with certain purity, and other people are born with violent tendencies, and I think it's a little bit problematic in some ways for a lot of people, that basically what you're born with is what you deserved. I think a lot of people react very strongly to that idea. For instance, like let's say you were abused as a child. Was that your karma? That is very harsh. So I feel that the idea of karma has to be, it's not a necessary fact, if you like, in my opinion, of yoga, because you have a life history as well, and we can see our conditioning, we can see our environment that we grew up in, and we can see that history has an impact on us. So we become the person that our environment has supported effectively. So your track history, what you've done for the last 10, 15, 20 years will impact what kind of yoga teacher you're going to be. I don't know if I can really speak about previous incarnations, although classically it's always said some people are born into this embodiment already close to being realized, and some people are far, far, far away from it.
But at the same time, you always have a choice. Even if, like, for the past 20 years, your life has been hell or whatever, each second, you always have the choice to just change everything. But it's just maybe harder.
In theory, but I think in practice that's not really true because of the conditioning, because we're very deeply conditioned. It's hard to make those changes. I think freedom is something actually not so close to the surface. Freedom is really to be able to feel differently, not necessarily to act differently, to respond differently to a situation. And most of us are extremely reactive to situations. That's the consequence of conditioning, consequence of maybe genetics, maybe family upbringing, maybe a past life. But that is actually our unfreedom, is that we react to situations without any self-control. And freedom, according to yoga, is to be able to react to a situation, or to not react is probably a better way, but to choose how you're going to feel.
Yeah.
Not to act on the way you feel, but to choose how to feel about something and then make a righteous decision based on that.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean,
Powerful.
the practice of jnana yoga would be to take one's abusive experiences of being abused from the environment and to respond to them from a place of either internalizing that abuse or seeing it as the teacher of pain and overcoming immense adversity. So it is a difficult practice, but I mean that's just a more extreme version of looking at the way that one ingests a burger and 2 beers and choosing whether or not they're going to continue to participate in Ahimsa.
I think it's actually also very real. You know, we said before that pain causes education.
Yeah.
And another way to look at why somebody might be born into an abusive situation might be to question what role that person has in life in terms of being an educator for humanity. From my experience, the few people that I'm really aware of who've experienced abuse, they display the deepest compassion, sensitivity, and virtuous qualities.
Yes.
And it's almost as though taking on the karma of others, you know, like Jesus Christ on the cross being crucified for the sins of humanity.
Yeah.
You know, what kind of an act of sacrifice is that? And maybe something similar is happening where people are being born into situations which, you know, just from a karmic point of view, it doesn't seem to make sense. You know, did they deserve that? Or did they actually choose that as an opportunity to heal those around them, you know, to educate?
Yeah, I mean, I think that maybe people might get upset because they feel that they're being punished. But when I think about like my relationship with pain and people that have undergone suffering, that these people become incredibly resilient and strong. And also, you know, teachers, then you can teach how to move through the suffering. So it's almost like education. It's and it's really important and valuable. And I guess maybe seeing the value of that is not common, but I wish it was.
Cool. Guys, wow, this is pretty deep ending to this little chat. Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you very much
Yeah,
for
thanks.
your time. Is there something that we want to add, or maybe we save it for next?
Well, I just want to say that obviously what we just spoke about is a very delicate subject, and I hope it has not caused offense or
Ahimsa.
difficulty for people.
Sure. Yeah, it's pretty delicate. You know, we're here. We try our best, and
Yeah, and I mean, if people have feedback or you want to ask questions, you can message us at yogisontheroad@gmail.com, and we're happy to include people who listen in part of the discussion. I mean, this is for you guys, you know, essentially.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks, Guy. Thanks, Alexis.
Thank you.
Thanks
See you
for
guys
listening.
next time.